Emil Guillermo. Emil, Amok to you. Here with my pal Kulintong Gong. He's got the barong. He's got the Mindanao knob. If you are seeing this, I mean, some of you are just listening to it. I don't know. I mean, maybe you're seeing it on Twitter at Emil Amok, or maybe on YouTube, or YouTube, our YouTube channel, or Facebook Watch, or Facebook Live, or on amok.com. Welcome. This is Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. This is the emphasis on micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs, because no one ever asks us our opinion on anything. I mean, that's why we have Asian Twitter. That's why we have, our little pockets where there's a little buzz about what people are saying. Now, speaking of Asian Twitter, I saw a kind of a takedown. Someone was saying, oh, here's this thing about model minorities. And someone was on her high horse today and said, hey, are you still on that? Move on. Like, the thing is, I know we want to be fresh and new and we want to be groundbreaking, but here's the thing about the model minority myth. It's still huge. It's still huge in the minds of people. Now, I know maybe some of you out there might think, hey, old news, let's move on. I don't want to deal with the model minority. I've been the model minority, or I'm beyond the model minority, or whatever your connection to the phrase is. You don't buy it, you don't believe it, you're past it, you're through it. It's a continuation of generation after generation, and some are experiencing it for the first time. Some have no clue. Model minority, wasn't Michelle Yeoh a model minority when she was younger? No, not that kind of model. The point is, this is something that we have to deal with, I think, almost forever, until we get it into people's minds that, hey, we can dispense with it if it's no longer a problem. But it's still a problem. Now, some people in the avant-garde, some people who think they, want to be the arbiters of taste and say, model minority, old news. I assure you, model minority is not old news. It's not old news for the person who just immigrated within the last 5-10 years and is now trying to figure out their lives in the American system. It's not old news for people who aren't immigrants, but were born here within the last 10, 15, 20 years, who are now of age and trying to figure out where they fit in. This is Asian American. This is, we experience this almost in perpetuity until we break the cycle. And unfortunately, it's not easy to break the cycle. Not everyone gets the memo. I can just say that there are things that I've experienced when I was younger that I wish were not valid now, today, but they're valid. Model minority, that idea, the myth, is still valid. And sometimes it just bears repeating. You just got to repeat it, because some people won't get the word, or some people think they're beyond it, and then they'll like pick themselves back up and they'll say, well, what happened to us? I've been model minoritied. Oh, that's what it was. It's something that we battle in perpetuity, unfortunately. But only the playbook changes because new time, new circumstances, new people, but we still got to fight it. We still got to deal with it. And so, like I said, I saw something in Asian American Twitter. It just happened to pop up on my Twitter feed, and I said, and it was someone just going kind of like, when someone tweeted out something about a story on the model minority idea, and the response was, "Oh my God, you guys are still on that? Move on." Almost dismissively, as if that were enough to take care of it. To believe that, oh, we are. I mean, on some level, I agree with her. We got to move on and deal with new challenges, but we shouldn't fool ourselves. The model minority myth persists, and because it does, we cannot forget. That's just the truth. That's just the truth. Hey, so it's May 31st. It's a Tuesday, and I voted. I'm a permanent vote by mail guy. The election is not until June 7th. But I'm just saying that if you haven't voted yet, they are accepting ballots by mail. They're accepting ballots wherever you are in California. And I say this thinking, or I'm assuming, if you're Asian American, I have an excellent chance of being right if I assume you're from California. Of course, we should never assume. But that California primary is coming up, and there's some interesting things in here. I think of all the offices that I voted for, just going through the ballot, I will say this. It's always complicated. It's always complicated to vote in America. I find that if you vote from home, it's a little easier. You have resources around. You can consult things. And I just find that I'll go through the names. I say, I don't know this person. And I could just say, who is this person, Gavin Newsom? Or what does he stand for? Or pick out a name. I didn't know anything about the insurance commissioners, except Ricardo Lara is an incumbent. I didn't know, for example, until I opened my mail, that he was an LGBTQ candidate. And then here's the other thing. You're just going to find a bunch of people's names. It's an open primary, and the top two move on. And so you'll see them all bunched in there. They don't separate the Republicans. It's all one list. So if you haven't already thought about voting by mail permanently, think about it, because it's just convenient. And then once you get it, like I've gotten mine here, I just send it off. And when you send it off, you're done. You've done your duty. You've done your civic duty. But like I said, there's a number of people here that I had to choose who to vote for. If I met that person, if I knew that person, regardless of what stuff is out there in the media about that person, if I knew the person, sometimes that's enough. Or if I met that person, now I know people aren't going to have necessarily the access of a person who does the news, but my access isn't any more than really the most regular people who might just go to an event and see someone, shake their hand, say hi. But there are some people I've known personally, talked to personally, and it's amazing how that little thing makes a difference. It's amazing how if someone comes door to door and knocks on your door and says, hi, I'm running for this, I'm running for that. So I think, if you haven't voted yet and want to know, find out where you can meet these guys and gals, because There's just something about that connection. Now, you might also notice that a number of ads are being shown on television. Gavin Newsom has his ad. The Rob Bonta ads are out. I wasn't sure what kind of a dogfight he was going to be in here now, but we'll see. I don't see any challengers coming up. He has the power of incumbency. And as I've said in my columns on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, I think he is the man to beat. I think Bonta, I think the world of Bonta, I think he's got a bright future ahead. Anyone who steps into that AG's office does. And in terms of Asian Americans in politics, forget about the next 5 years, think the next 10, 15 years. And don't think just California, think national level. I think you got to be looking at someone like Bonta, Asian American, Filipino. He's running on his own to take the attorney's general seat that he was handed by Gavin Newsom a year ago. But I think he's done a good job. I think Bonta has done a good job. So I think of all the races, that's the one that I thought was probably the most important. Some of the most competitive ones, the comptroller race, that's tough because there could be some crossover. If you like Lan He-chen is out of, I think he's out of the Hoover Institution. He was a Romney staffer, I believe, because he was on a lot of the cable news outlets talking about the election. I don't know if it's a crowded race. There's also Yvonne Yu, former mayor down south of a small little Southern California town, I believe Monterey Park. And looks like she's got some money for ads. So look at the comptroller race. It should be interesting because you got a number of Asians, and then you have someone like Malia Cohen, who is a former San Francisco city and county supervisor. She's running. So I thought that was an interesting race to kind of chew over. And then there's a race, my wife asked me about lieutenant governor. We have a system here where it's sort of like in California, it's sort of like the Philippines, where the president and the vice president, they run independently. Same party, sort of, but, it splits the ticket somewhat. And I don't know anything about Eleni Kounalakis, except that she started making some waves maybe a year or two ago. She's done a good job. She's the incumbent. I think the power of incumbency is going to work for her there. But there's just a lot of people want to be lieutenant governor, and maybe she'll have the edge. Anyway, if you're wondering, well, what about all those ballot measures that you're starting to see advertisements for, like the propositions on gambling and casino gambling and online gambling? That's coming out for the general, not the primary in June 7th. So you'll see those ballots coming out later on in November, but that's going to be a dogfight because there's some subtleties, and based on how you feel about the Indians, the Native American casinos, and the corporate casino interest, and horse racing's involved there, as well as corporate gaming, meaning sports betting. That's going to be a real dogfight. So we're seeing some teasers out there. Oh, one thing I want to mention. I'm in a district where one of the congressional people is an Indian American, Harpreet Chima. I didn't know Harpreet Singh Chima. I know he's running against an incumbent, Josh Harder, who a lot of people a couple of years ago really went to bat for Harder, thinking that he was going to be the guy who flips the Senate and he was going to be, one of the, maybe he would be one of the squad members from California. No. Josh Harder has been a disappointment for anyone who is left of center, somewhat progressive. He's been more conservative than not, but he represents a conservative area. I think he's up against it. So there's a guy named Harpreet Chima from Stockton who is an Indian American and I think has an excellent chance. Anyway, just some thoughts about the California primary. What I'm surprised by is all the Asian names I'm starting to see in California, which is good. Because this is how there's real power. Now you can have real power too in the media. You can have real power by speaking out and well, it's freer if you're a journalist or work in the mainstream. But there's something to be said about public life. And if you have the temperament, the money, and the patience, that is a way to go. And I'm just happy to see Asian names pop up here, not just here in California, but all over the country. It's a positive development, and it shows that even though it's taken a while, we've developed a group of young people who are now looking to have their voices heard, looking to make an impact on public policy directly by seeking elective office. And I just think that's great. I think that's great. All right, now we talked about Memorial Day yesterday, and I talked about my first gunman. First time I covered a mass shooting. It was in 1980 when a guy named Alvin Lee King, dressed in camo gear, went into the back of a Baptist church in Dangerfield, Texas, and shot up the church yelling, "This is war. This is war." And I the only point I really wanted to make is that we are in a war. And while I do not want to diminish the sacrifices and the service of people who actually enlist, people who are in the armed services in the military, I think, judging from all the shootings we've seen, and it's huge. I mean, you can go back to just 2009. There's more than 1,500 shootings, mass shootings, right? There is a war going on here. It's a gun battle. It's an epidemic. And we got to look at it that way. And that's going to determine, believe me, that's going to determine, I mean, a lot in terms of our safety. I think it's going to determine a lot in our politics, because I was just seeing how Canada is acting on, on real gun reform measures that you don't see happening here in the United States. I mean, they're talking about it now, but what they've got proposed now that will, I mean, there's not a matter of if, there will be changes in the law in Canada, which will make it harder for people to get weapons, harder for people to get the magazines, harder. It's just, why just the proximity of Canada to the U.S.? Why do they get it and we don't? And that's a puzzler. But this is really why I say, if you begin to think of this as a war on innocent, peaceful American citizens by the gun lobby, by the people who push and sustain and perpetuate the gun epidemic. I mean, that's really the greatest threat right now to our democracy, I think. There are other issues, sure, but I think we're seeing it. We're witnessing it. And we're seeing Republicans really having a hard time understanding how important it is to just to let go of the grip, the mutual grip it has with the gun lobby, and start looking at the people. I don't know if we're going to see it anytime soon, like, this election cycle, but it's important. And, we're not even seeing the coverage of all the shootings that happen, all the shootings that take place. But Uvalde's a special one. And the fact that the funerals are happening all throughout this week and next, and then more details come out about how those mistakes were made, how lives could have been saved, and how, if laws were in place, you can't deny, if laws were in place to prevent this shooter from getting his weapons on his 18th birthday, many more of those 19 dead, 21 total, would be alive today. If all he had was a 6 gun, no automatic, semi-automatic magazine, if he had to go one shot at a time, you wouldn't see the massive number of casualties that you see now. That's really the key. And that's one of the things, I think in Canada, they're looking at a provision that will prevent anyone from getting, from being able to fire more than 5 shots at a time. There's no reason you need that to protect yourself. No reason you need more than 5. You just don't. And if you do, then maybe we ought to add a provision where people learn more about gun safety, learn more about how to use their gun. So just the presence of the gun, not the use of it, not the firing of it, but the presence of the gun is enough. Some people say, well, Emil, you're just talking the gun lobby logic right there. No, I'm just saying there's a lot of people who don't know their guns, and they have them, and they're dangerous. They're far more dangerous than you think. I was thinking about, when I wrote my piece on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog, thinking about that guy in Dangerfield, Texas in 1980. And just thinking about how all throughout in my media life, when I was a reporter there in Texas, my first mass shooting, when I was a talk show host in the mid 80s in Washington, D.C., this gun issue has always been with us. And there was a time, when the assault weapons ban was passed in 89 in California, and then subsequent on the federal level, and then, of course, they let it expire. But there was a time when I thought, oh, well, we are at a point where we came to our senses. No, we have not come to our senses. And we're still talking about this because people will insist that they need their guns. All right, I want to let's see, talk about Michelle Wu. Michelle Wu, mayor of Boston, she went to Harvard College and Harvard Law. She spoke at Class Day, which is a significant day, Class Day. It's where you talk specifically to the graduating class. Where is that article here? And she was interesting. She talked to the class of 2022. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, 07. That's when she graduated. And JD 2012, young woman. Seen as a protege of Elizabeth Warren. Here's what she said. She talked about the word, the Harvard motto, Veritas, and she says she essentially gave a talk about truth. She says, my truth is I came to Harvard for the clam chowder. She had no grand career plans as a student nor a clear academic passion, she said, but she did eat a lot of soup in her dorm. The oldest child of immigrant parents from Taiwan, she recalled always eating at home with chopsticks. On the rare occasions when the family dined out, it was to old country buffet, where no matter how stuffed she was, she always found room for the glorious clam chowder and soft ice cream. So that was her thing. She was into clam chowder, but more seriously, she said one of the last events her mother attended before having a mental breakdown was her own commencement. She had started showing signs of illness, paranoia, and delusions. This is the mother. But in the culture of the family that I grew up in, we couldn't bring our business to the public. It took months for her mother to seek treatment and many more months for Wu to share with her friends what was happening in her family. This is from Harvard Magazine. Accepting this truth had a profound effect on Wu's life. Soon after graduation, she stepped in as her mother's caregiver, began raising her sisters, and opened a small tea shop to stay financially afloat. Through these experiences, Wu began to see that the systems we had to interact with weren't designed for people like my family. She also saw that she could have a role in fixing them. So she said, since leaving Harvard Yard in 2007, Wu said she's learned three things about Veritas. First, your own deep truth sets the foundation for your happiness, health, and impact, urging students to take care of themselves and figure out what gets them excited to wake up in the morning. Figure it out. What makes you excited? That's a good point. What's your deep truth? It's the foundation to your happiness, your health, and your impact. Second, Michelle Wu says, see what's real. There is no substitute for lived experience. If you're trying to solve a problem in the world, understand what it feels like first, seek out those closest to the challenge and those who will be most impacted by the solution. For Wu, a self-proclaimed transit nerd who has vowed to make the MBTA subway and bus system free of charge in Boston, that means taking public transportation to work every day and seeing the system's strengths and limitations up close. And that's a good idea. I'm going to be in Boston, I'm going to take the bus. I'm going to take the train. And if I don't feel safe, I'm going to write a letter to Mayor Wu. Third, and finally, she says, tell the truth when it's hard. I'm not just talking about admitting to a deep love for clam chowder or even working to break the stigma of mental illness. In politics and in family and in work, speak your truth and feel true to the urgency you feel. Because fundamentally, speaking truth is the only way to build a foundation for trust. And that is what we are missing in our society and our democracy today. Trust. I mean, she's right. I mean, we just came out of an administration where the 45th president, the twice impeached former president who scapegoated Asian Americans, had a problem with the truth, had a problem with telling the truth, embraced openly the lies, and had his ranking of the big lie, right? That he still believes in. Truth. It's simple. Veritas. Veritas is the truth. In politics, family, and work, speak your truth. Feel true to the urgency you feel, because fundamentally, speaking truth is the only way to build a foundation for trust, and that is what we are missing in our society and our democracy today. That is out of the mouth of Mayor Michelle Wu of Boston. I just wanted to share that with you because she spoke at Class Day last week. I didn't get too much happening, right? With Uvalde. Too much happening. And Class Day is very, very meaningful to me because when I graduated from there and I got to speak during Class Day, I spoke my truth on Class Day. But my truth sounded like, oh, it's so good to be here at Harvard. That was my truth. It was satirical. But I knew when he had a chance, I wanted to share that from Michelle Wu because it's true. She encouraged everyone to take some time for themselves once in a while. This is Michelle Wu. Hug a friend, lie in the sun, read a book, and when you're ready, seek the truth. It's kind of simple, right? I mean, what more is there? We want the truth. Look at everything that's bothering us today. What's bothering us in Uvalde, as the details start trickling in slowly, we need the truth. What happened? There's 19 cops outside in the hall and the gunman inside, and you haven't heard anything from the school district police chief. In fact, they canceled his ceremony where he was going to assume the role as city council member. I think it's because there's some question. I mean, I don't think there's anything they could do to prevent him if he won an election fair and square. But his ability as a public official is certainly in doubt. If a bad decision resulted in many more deaths at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde than they deserve to have. Even one, right? We need the truth. It always boils down to the truth. So I thank Michelle Wu for sharing or speaking. I'm reading this from Harvard Magazine, but it's true. Tell the truth when it's hard, because fundamentally speaking truth is the only way to build a foundation for trust, and that is what we are missing in our society and our democracy today. I can't say it enough because it's a truth. Because when we don't get the truth, then we're dealing with lies, and then we are prone to make the wrong decisions based on misassumptions, based on, the lies are told from a perspective that helps the person perpetrating the lie, which is why you need the people to help you discern the truth. Saw an interesting article also in the New York Times this morning. This is by Elizabeth Diaz. What's the limit on how much we can cry? This is interesting because she cites she cites a spiritual leader, but not a Catholic, not a Protestant. She cites a Buddhist monk. 2 days after the massacre of children in Uvalde and 12 days after the racist mass killing of Buffalo, Chen Xinghan, a chaplain and teacher, told a Buddhist parable. A man is shot with a poisoned arrow, Ms. Han recounted as she drove a group of high school seniors to visit a Thai temple in Massachusetts. The arrow piercing his flesh, the man demands answers. What kind of arrow is it? What shot or who shot the arrow? What kind of poison is it? What teachers are on the arrow? Or what feathers are on the arrow? A peacock's or a hawk's? All of these questions miss the point, the Buddha tells his disciple. What is important is pulling out the poison arrow and tending to the wound, taking action, not asking all these questions about, oh, what about this? What are we seeing? It's not analyzing that way. It's taking action and dealing with the wound. Ms. Han says, we need to be moved by the pain of all the suffering, but it is important that we are not paralyzed by it. It makes us value life because we understand life is very precious. Life is very brief. It can be extinguished in a single instant. But we have to deal with pulling the arrow out. That's the truth. Well, we're asking questions too. We're doing both at the same time. I just thought it was interesting that the anecdotal lead of this feature on grief in Uvalde goes to the story revolves around an interview with a Buddhist monk, an Asian monk. And that's diversity. So, all this, this is the last day of AAPI month. This is the last day of mental health month. And so all these things lead to issues of mental health, AAPI, shootings. There was that shooting in Laguna Woods in Orange County. A guy from Taiwanese American from Las Vegas, down on his luck. David Joe drove from Vegas to LA, that congregation in Laguna Woods, really sought them out, opened fire, killed one, shot six, one fatally. I wonder if people were able to intervene, if he had friends, or if he had the good sense to understand what was going on. Or maybe all he saw, all he knew was the answers in the gun. I know we won't know, but I think about that. I think about Mental Health Month. All these people need, when you talk about mental health, they need a counselor, they need a talking doctor. I mean, you can see a psychiatrist and get drugs, I guess. But usually what I find is people don't want the pills. People want the people. People want other people to talk to. That's why when I talk to people who've called suicide hotlines, they'll tell me, oh, I didn't even bother with suicide hotline. I'll call it Domino's. I'll call it. I'll call, some company, customer care, customer service. I just want to talk to a human being. person I know says. Of course, it probably is better to deal with someone who's trained in dealing with people who are experiencing suicidal ideation. However, people need people. People just need to talk to other people, not pills, other people. And as we wrap up Mental Health Month, if you've got that issue, don't be ashamed. Don't suffer from the stigma. Seek people out. Talk to people. Hell, I'll talk to you. Or look, you just turn on the show and just talk back to your screen. But I talk to you. It's important. I know a lot of people in our community tend to shun mental health or see it as a stigmatized notion that they want to avoid. There should be no stigma. There should only be help administered to those in need. It's as simple as that. Mental health. I mean, you saw it. I think one of the best examples last year was watching that whole thing in the Olympics with Simone Biles and just being unable to do all the little things that she does on the gymnastics floor. And then to see Suni Lee rise under the pressure, and then to hear them talk about mindfulness and talk about how to get their minds right. I mean, this is a form of mental health, that kind of pressure, that kind of stress. Because what did Suni Lee constantly say? I'm enough. I'm good enough. I'm right. Because, you know, when you're a performer, sometimes just a little thing can just throw you off. I mean, it happened to Simone Biles. We saw that. And all throughout, as Suni Lee was trying to prepare to compete as she took over for Biles, as you know, she was next up as a teammate. I just remember all the things that Suni Lee said, indicating she was very aware of her mental health, of her mindfulness. And believe me, there's no stigma attached to dealing with your mental health. We got to get over that. We just have to get over that. And I know it's probably a coincidence that Mental Health Month and AAPI Month sort of in May, the same time. Think about that. Both aspects of the month are something that we can benefit from. You know, the sense of pride, the sense of history, the sense of all the things that we inherit as a community of Asian American peoples. And then to see the great resources, or to understand how there are resources to help us as a thinking, feeling community that just needs to get stronger in terms of our attention to our mental health. Breaking through all the self-imposed restrictions and the shame and the self-doubt and the lack of confidence and the willingness just to be seen, to be visible, to be heard. Some people say, oh, Emil, it sounds like you just We're just lacking in confidence. Well, yeah, it sounds like, oh, lacking in confidence. You can say that. But what prevents us from gaining that sense of confidence? Is it a shame? Some kind of shame, some kind of feeling, some kind of kowtowing to an inner critic. Asian Americans who are in college, I've talked to counselors. They say the idea of imposter syndrome, one of the biggest things afflicting Asian Americans. I don't belong here. I don't deserve it. I don't. Well, you know me. I'm a big proponent of mindfulness. The way you deal with it. Take this hand here, put it here. Take this hand here, put it here. Give yourself a squeeze. Touch off that vagus nerve. Take a couple deep breaths. And know, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay this AAPI month that dovetails or that coincides with Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's going to be okay in June. Believe me, we got some things coming up in June that are going to test us. They've always tested us. But we'll be mindful and we'll be ready to talk about it. All that coming up in June. So this is show 319. And it's not that we're taking a little hiatus. We're just going to do the show a little differently. We are going to send out stuff, live streams. Maybe we're going to it's kind of a misnomer if it's a live repeat, but we're going to send out a live repeat for the next few days or so, and then come up with some pop-ups, like 5-10 minute pop-ups every now and then. You're just going to have to look at your Twitter feed or look at amok.com. It's all going to be there, or the YouTube channel. But I'm going to go retreat and contemplate and take a little time. That's why I voted early. I want my vote to count. So here I am. I got my official ballot to count. Yeah, if you're not a vote by mail guy, you got to be a vote by mail guy. Look at this. See, I got my I voted. Voto. I voted. I'm gonna wear that all for the next week. Gotta get your ballot out there. All right. I probably will talk to you when the Warriors play the Celtics. Maybe not. I already said Warriors in 6. You know, a sweep possible. It depends. If the Warriors are really peaking and making their shots, it could be 5. I'll go 6. I don't think 7. I think it's going to be like the Mavs series. At some point, it'll go up and down based on how seriously the Warriors take it. If they're very serious and are attuned to the game, they'll take care of it. I want to say 5, but I'm going to say 6. Just to be safe. All right. That's it. Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, or Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It's, well, you got until midnight. Essentially in the books. I hope you had a good one. It was, by and large, for me, I think a good month. A lot of stuff happened. But, here I want to share this story with you first, before I go. This is in the Times. Today, during the Omicron wave, death rates soared for older people. Oh my God. Last year, people 65 and older died from COVID at lower rates than in previous waves. But with Omicron and waning immunity, death rates rose again. So, this is something. The Omicron wave was deadlier than Delta for older people in the US. And that's almost like 163% of the Delta peak. That's what Omicron was. That is scary. And so I think if you're over 50, get a second booster and understand that Paxlovid is, understand how you can get that if you, it's an antiviral pill, if you get COVID. I say this as I have just begun to be more active. And here's a Dr. Sharon Inoue, a geriatrician and a professor of medicine at Harvard. She says, I think we're going to see the death rates rising. It is going to become more and more risky for older adults as their immunity wanes. And they show a number of these graphs in the New York Times that just show if you're vaccinated with the booster, you're much safer. With the booster, COVID-19 death rates for people 65 plus, with the booster, 7 per 100,000. Vaccinated, 24 per 100,000. This is in 2022. Unvaccinated, 156 deaths per 100,000. What does this tell you? It says, if you haven't been vaxxed, get vaxxed. If you haven't been boosted, get boosted. The numbers are out there. All right, I didn't want to forget to mention that. If you're older, be careful. I got my second booster, and you know what? The second booster didn't feel like anything. I thought I'd get sick. I didn't get sick. But I feel ready to take on the world. Me and Kulantan Gong here, taking on the world. All right, that's it for our show today. Show 319. Remember, we'll be streaming something live at 2 o'clock Pacific tomorrow. But for the most part, we'll be dropping stuff, quickie things, shorties, I guess they're called. Not exactly TikToks, although they're probably going to be more like TikToks. And if I can ever figure out, or it's not a matter of figuring it out. It's just that I don't want to go on TikTok. But anyway, there'll be little things, and I'll be putting them on Twitter. I'll be putting them on mostly on amok.com, my website. So, hey, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here, live on tape. Till next time. Mahal.